we're going to go through. We're going to talk about the writers' poll. Okay. And for those who don't know, the writers' poll is we call some of our friends from around the nation,
and state,
around the state, and luminaries.
Yes.
And say, hey, we want to get your opinion on college football in 2016 in the Lone Star State.
Yeah.
We also asked some bigger questions, but generally speaking. And so we had, let's see, Mike Craven, our friend, Al Pickett, the great Al Pickett out there in Abilene, Zach Barnett from FootballScoop.com, Joe Vazzelli from the San Marcos Daily Record, Ty Duffy, your buddy from the Big Lead, Chuck Carlton from the Dallas Morning News, Jarrett Johnson from Raider Power, my buddy Bill Connolly at SB Nation, Jake Trotter and Max Olson from ESPN, and then you and I.
Yes.
And so those are the people who kind of, and we asked them a number of questions. And what's funny is that if you want to completely counterattack my trying to brush off the conspiracy theory that we weren't that we had Baylor on the cover, is that we had a number of people. We asked people who they think who's gonna win the Big 12 and who's gonna win the Heisman.
Yeah.
And we had 3 people who I won't name.
Yeah.
We did have 3 people who picked Baylor to win the Big 12.
Right.
We also had 1 person who picked Seth Russell to win the Heisman.
Yes.
And so when the Art Briles thing came down, I emailed those 3 people and I go, hey, would you like a mulligan?
Yeah.
And all of them took the mulligan.
Yeah.
So overall, the questions we asked, we started with if you had to buy stock in one FBS coach in Texas, who would you choose?
Yeah.
I was really pleased with the diversity of the answers.
A lot of different answers here.
But in the end, the overwhelming pick, there were 2 overwhelming picks. One was Gary Patterson.
Yeah.
And I think Gary Patterson, somebody's calling me. Sorry, sir, I can't answer. Gary Patterson, I think, is the safe pick. Gary Patterson is the blue chip stock, right?
Yeah.
Gary Patterson is investing in Apple. You know, it is boring, but it is going to give you a good, easy, solid return every year. You know what you're getting. There's little risk there in buying stock in him. The other one we got a lot of was Tom Herman.
He's the sexy pick
that's
now.
That's the getting in on the ground floor guy.
Yeah, buy now because, boy, those returns.
Oh, I think we also had a couple people pick Seth Luttrell at North Texas, which is
I thought it was interesting.
That's what I'm interested in. That's like there's this small company in like Boston you've never heard of, but they're about to blow up, and that's kind of what would be going there.
We also had a few people pick Art Briles, who later were like,
maybe not.
Take that off.
Which new hire will have the biggest impact on their on the program in the next 3 years? Seth Luttrell, Frank Wilson, and Everett Withers. And we phrased that specifically because it's very hard to gauge the long term.
Right.
Because, Frank Wilson may end up be at UTSA for 10 years and end up taking them to a long term run, but we gotta truncate it and say in the next 3 years who's going to be the best. A lot of Seth Luttrell.
Yeah, Luttrell ran away with this.
Ran away with it, but the other one that came up a lot was I'm sorry,
Everett.
Everett Withers.
Yeah.
Everett Withers. They think that because he has a program that is a little more intact and has a little bit more
and a proven track record.
And a proven track record. That's easy. We did have 1 vote for Frank Wilson, and I think that comes down to the recruiting class.
Yeah.
Let's see. Which will happen first? Texas wins the Big 12 or Texas A&M wins the SEC? Texas was the big winner here.
Right.
But as you'll read in the magazine, that is saying more about the Big 12 than it is about Texas. Mm-hmm. That is saying the Big 12 is more winnable. And A&M, if A&M's going to win the SEC, think about what they'd have to do. They'd first of all have to win the West.
Right.
Okay. They'd have to win the SEC West, which means you have to beat Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi schools, and LSU.
Best case
and
scenario,
Arkansas, by the
you
way.
can lose 1 game.
Exactly. That's very tough. And then let's say they do that. They got to go win the SEC title game against
Georgia,
exactly.
Florida,
Tennessee, maybe. So that is so Texas was the big winner there, just because the conference is a little bit easier to navigate. Which story will emerge that nobody's talking about? There were a couple interesting ones here.
Tons.
Joe Vazzelli mentioned Greg Ward Jr. as a Heisman candidate, which I love.
Yeah.
Jarrett Johnson, in a bit of a prescient move, said Waco media culture. Boy, howdy. Bill Connolly thinks of things in a very interesting way. I'm just going to read it directly from here. Houston had turnovers luck and a couple of unlikely wins last year. What happens if the Cougars are still awesome but suffer some bad breaks and go 9-3? Is Tom Herman still the heir apparent at approximately every big-time school?
It's a good question.
I've mentioned that before, that I have some questions about Houston only because they had big-time turnover luck last year, and they've got to replace their most dominant unit, which is the secondary. Yeah. And Bill, it's comforting when smart people say what you're thinking, right?
Yes.
And that's a guy of a smart guy. If you were building your team, a team around any current Texas college player, who would it be? Got a lot of Pat Mahomes, got a lot of Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
One guy, who is it? It's Ty Duffy said Jarrett Stidham. Not a bad pick. Young quarterback. Not a bad move. Which freshman will have the biggest impact on a Texas program?
Runaway winner here.
There was a runaway winner here, and that is it was Shane Buechele at Texas. Right. But we did have a couple people who said Devin Duvernay. Yeah. But that was assuming that he was going to be at Baylor. Yeah. That was one thing we did not catch. I will tell you there is one small mistake there. Yeah. If you had to pay to
but when the magazine went to press,
yes,
he was still at Baylor.
Absolutely. In theory,
I guess he never was because that letter never went in, but none of us knew.
If you had to pay to attend one Texas college game in 2016, who would you choose? Interesting mix here. A lot of Texas and Baylor. I said Houston and Oklahoma because I think there's a college football playoff berth on the line there. Texas Tech and TCU. A&M and UCLA got a vote from Ty Duffy. Baylor and Tech. A lot of different choices there. And then which FBS program is most likely to have a new coach in 2017? And then we managed to sneak in an editor's note that says this poll was conducted prior to Art Briles' termination of Baylor. So assuming people didn't know that Baylor was going to have a new coach. But a lot of Tom Herman's going to be Houston's. A lot of people think Tom Herman's leaving Houston.
Like it felt like it was a moving target here, right? Because a lot of people were searching for the first guy to get fired. Mm-hmm. When I think the real answer is it's more likely, right, that Herman has another great year and people come for him.
Yes.
So I think our numbers were split 50-50 between people who are like, yeah, Herman's great and there will be people coming for him, and the other people going, oh, well, this guy's going to get fired.
Correct.
Which is a little trickier.
We also asked a lot about who's going to win the Big 12. Oklahoma was the overwhelming winner. The SEC is mostly Alabama with a couple LSUs and Ole Misses kicked in.
Yep.
Who's going to win the American? A lot of Houston, a little bit. One person said South Florida. One person said Tulsa, which is a big projection pick.
Yeah, that is.
Who will win CUSA? A lot of Western Kentucky. Who will win the Sun Belt? A lot of Appalachian State. And then who's going to win the national championship? A lot of Alabama. It's pretty evenly split between Alabama and Clemson. Those teams be too big. Who will win the Heisman Trophy? Deshaun Watson starts as the heavy favorite, but there's a lot of Leonard Fournette in there as well. Christian McCaffrey as well. What will be the Cowboys' record, and will they make the playoffs? The low end is 7-9. The high end is 10-6. And then it's mostly yes, a few no's as far as the playoffs. What will be the Texans' record? Will they make the playoffs? Mostly no's, and a lot of 6-10s, 7-9s in there. Mm-hmm. And then pick your Super Bowl matchup and winner. Unfortunately, we did not get the Brent Zwerneman from our friend from the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News. And here's a bit that he does every year. Yep. Every year he picks Cowboys and Texans in the Super Bowl. Every single year. Yeah. So I had to carry on that tradition, and I picked the Texans over the Cowboys in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
I don't really know. It's probably going to be like Panthers and Steelers or something like that.